Martyr anymore doesn't need a first miracle to be beatified. The feeling is that having made the ultimate witness to faith, namely giving your life, that's miraculous enough. That takes extraordinary grace.
Oscar Romero was born in 1917 in the mountains of El Salvador, near the border with Honduras. As a young man, he was drawn to the priesthood and attended seminaries in San Miguel and San Salvador. He completed his theological studies in Rome and was ordained in 1942. He returned to San Salvador, served as a country priest, and was administrator of 2 seminaries. In 1970, he was ordained a bishop, and in 1977, he was named Archbishop of San Salvador. Bishop Vincenzo Paglia is the Roman postulator for the cause of canonization of Archbishop Romero.
Negli anni '80,
in the 1980s, Salvador lived a period of enormous crises, and it was dictated by the fact that few families owned all of El Salvador. And so the social situation was extremely serious. In addition, there was one party who had created death squads. These death squads conducted missions for killing, for murdering. Romero was elected to represent a church that was more traditional, in a matter of speaking.
Romero fu eletto come rappresentante quasi di una chiesa più tradizionale per certi versi.
Archbishop Romero was thought by some to be a conservative priest and a friend to the wealthier classes in El Salvador. However, after 10 days as Archbishop, Oscar Romero's close friend, Father Regilio Grande, was murdered. Father Grande worked with the poor and was outspoken about the lack of social justice. His death had a powerful impact on Oscar Romero.
At this point, Romero changes his perspective. He says, okay, at this point, I will begin to speak at the top of my voice, that which is happening. And this is where this tension began, so that on Sundays, during the homily, he began to recount everything that happened during the week. A homily followed by all of Salvador. If you were in the cathedral and you left the cathedral and crossed the entire city, all the radios were on, and you continued to hear the homily of this bishop. His was the only free voice.
I like to make an appeal in a special way to the men in the army. Brothers, each one of you is one of us. We are the same people. The farmers and peasants that you kill are your own brothers and sisters. When you hear the words of a man telling you to kill, think instead in the words of God. Thou shalt not kill. No soldier is obligated to obey an order contrary to the law of God.
A questo punto Romero comprende che lui è la voce del popolo dei più poveri.
At this point, Romero understands that he is the voice of the population of the poorest. The death squads threatened him, and Romero was afraid of the threat of death. And he was afraid because he was a fearful person also. But his faith keeps him going. In Rome, they said, return, come to Rome. That way you will not have any more threats. And Romero responds, the shepherd stays with his flock, he doesn't abandon them. And he stayed with them, and the more the threats increased, the more he was afraid.
On March 24, 1980, Archbishop Romero was murdered by an assassin's bullet while celebrating Mass in a small chapel in San Salvador. An estimated 200,000 people attended his funeral. Suddenly, government troops attacked with explosives and gunfire, sending the overflowing crowd into a panic. 40 were killed, many of them trampled, others shot to death. Amidst the chaos, the funeral mass could not be finished, and Romero was quickly buried in the Metropolitan Cathedral. After his death, the people of El Salvador called for his canonization.
Yes, Monsignor, I believe, was a saint, and the people also claim him as a saint, not only a saint, but a prophet and a martyr. And in fact, to begin with, His testimony of life already is sanctity. His martyrdom is sanctity.
My role in the beatification of Monsignor Romero is about all as a historian. I had to establish the historic truth about Monsignor Romero, his person, his life, his pastoral works.
As diocesan postulator, Monsignor Jesus Delgado oversaw the investigation made in the diocese. After the Roman phase began, Monsignor Ricardo Urost was named vice postulator for this cause. He has been involved with the cause since its inception.
I was the judge here in this diocese when the first phase of the canonization is made in the diocese, and all the documents are sent to Rome for them to read them and to know them. And we had 43 witnesses about him, and all of them were sure that he was a martyr.
Oscar Romero. It seemed as if the Vatican under John Paul II felt that he was too sympathetic to the people that wanted change in Salvador. I mean, I think this is a terrible mistake in judgment. But he also wanted to make sure that he didn't make a martyr out of someone who could then be used for political purposes. And I think that's fair enough. They do want to distinguish between the two. You know, and keep in mind that in the Catholic Church, the people make saints too, regardless of the formal process. Oscar Romero is a saint among Latin American Catholics, regardless of what the Pope does.
I think that they are waiting that those who love him die and those who hate him also die, not to create a confusion or a polemic here in the country, because I think Bishop Romero was the most loved man in this country and the most hated man in this country.
Martyrdom is not as common in the Catholic Church as it once was, but many feel that Archbishop Romero's life and death stand as an example of a modern-day martyr. However, for the process of canonization, being officially declared a martyr is the explicit domain of the Vatican.
Martyrdom is a special grace that is given to only a very few. The general, normal road to heaven is through everyday life, immersing oneself in it, living it as God gives it, doing everything that life has to offer in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ.